When wars end, people expect peace. But for some companies, the money never stops. A powerful 2-second pause. The screen is dark, then cuts 2 quick, contrasting shots. A soldier lowering a flag. Then a stock market graph soaring. And what you're about to see is not a theory. It's the hidden ledger of history. A system so seamless, it turns ceasefire agreements into perpetual revenue streams. Stay with me. Because once you see this pattern, you will never look at the news the same way again. The treaties are signed. The cameras flash. Soldiers embrace their families. The headlines scream peace. The world breathes a sigh of relief, believing the machinery of violence has finally been switched off. The story we are sold is one of closure, a line drawn in the sand, a chapter closed. But in the shadow of that celebrated peace, in glass-walled skyscrapers, a world away from the ruins, a different kind of machinery is just shifting gears. It doesn't shudder to a halt. It purrs to life. For this network, the silent, interconnected web of capital contracts. And calculated interests, the ceasefire is not a finale. It is an intermission. The war ends on paper, not in the bank accounts. Let's be brutally clear. The moment the last bullet is fired, a country lies in ruins. Its infrastructure is skeletal, its economy shattered, its people in desperate need. This is the human cost. But for the entities we are about to name, this devastation is not a tragedy. It is a market specification, a business opportunity with staggering, multi-decade potential. For them, the war's conclusion is merely the opening of a new, even more lucrative fiscal quarter. For them, peace is not the end, it's phase 2. Who are the architects of this perpetual revenue stream? Let's meet the quiet victors. First, the arms companies. Their primary boom is during the fighting. But consider the aftermath. Standing armies don't disband. They retool. Weapons must be replenished. Technology must be upgraded for the next conflict. Peace becomes a period of rearmament. The pipeline shifts from urgent delivery to long-term contracts, but it never closes. Then, the lenders. A destroyed nation has no capital. Enter the reconstruction loan. Presented as a lifeline, it is also a financial instrument of brutal efficiency. The terms are set, the interest calculated. The debt is sovereignty to the nation itself, to be paid by generations of citizens through taxes. This debt becomes a chain, a form of economic enslavement that can last longer than the war. The banks become silent partners, entitled to a share of a nation's labor for decades. Next, the reconstruction corporations. The vast conglomerates that win the billion-dollar contracts to rebuild what was destroyed. Often, these are the same entities with political lobbies in powerful capitals, ensuring the loan money flows directly into their coffers. It's a closed loop. The money is borrowed, then spent with pre-chosen contractors. The country gets a physical rebuild and a mountainous debt. The irony is cruel. The same powers benefit from both the destruction and the reconstruction. Finally, the energy and resource companies. War disrupts oil fields and mines. The post-war period is about re-establishing control, signing new. More favorable extraction deals with a weakened government desperate for revenue. The scramble for resources doesn't pause for peace. It intensifies under the guise of economic stabilization. Together, they form an ecosystem. Their interests are perfectly aligned. The end of hostilities creates the perfect conditions: a desperate client, an urgent need, and no alternatives. The transition from the conflict phase to the profit phase is seamless, bureaucratic, and dressed in the language of help. The guns fall silent, but the ringing of cash registers grows louder. This is where we must follow the money flow critical blueprint. Step 1. The hollowed-out nation. The conflict ends. What remains is a country physically and economically dismantled. The immediate need is survival. Step 2. The lifeline that becomes a noose. To avert collapse, the government turns to international lenders. It secures massive loans. The signing ceremony is a photo op. Smiling financiers, grateful leaders. Hope seems restored. Step 3. The rebuilding cartel. The loans come with conditions. The money must be spent on projects with contractors, often multinationals from the lender nations. Costs are inflated. A significant portion of the borrowed money flows right back out of the war-torn country. Physical rebuilding begins. Financial extraction accelerates. Step 4. The perpetual upgrade. Simultaneously, the national military begins its modernization. New arms deals are signed. This spending further drains the borrowed capital, locking the nation into decades-long upgrade cycles. Step 5. The long shadow of debt. The final binding step. The projects are completed. The new weapons are in place. And the bill arrives at a 20, 30, or 40-year schedule of debt servicing. The interest must be paid. Every year, like clockwork. This debt becomes the budget's largest line item. It dictates policy, forces austerity, and cripples investment in the future in education, healthcare. Innovation because a huge portion of tax revenue is forever earmarked for foreign banks. The metaphor is undeniable. Bombs destroy cities. Contracts rebuild profits. The initial explosion creates the demand. The subsequent paperwork ensures the wealth transfer. The violence is temporary. The accounting is permanent. This is the system's architecture. But what does this cold logic feel like for the people who lived through the war? That is where the human tragedy deepens into a multi-generational sentence. This is where the ledger meets life, where sterile debt schedules translate into daily, grinding reality for millions. We've mapped the system. But what does this machine feel like? It feels like a second war, a quieter, slower, bureaucratic siege against the survivors. Imagine a father who fought, who lost his leg, who comes home to rubble. He hears peace and weeps with relief. He believes the sacrifice is over. But as years pass, his pension evaporates. The clinic is understaffed because the government froze hiring to meet debt payments. His children's school is crumbling because the education budget was slashed for austerity. His taxes, deducted from his meager stipend, don't pave his street. They are wire transferred across an ocean to service a loan he never signed. His physical war ended with a bang. His financial war is a slow, suffocating squeeze. This is the emotional reality. Citizens pay taxes for decades, not for their future, but for their past. Their labor feeds a debt they did not incur. Inflation eats their savings. The currency weakens. Poverty deepens, not from bombs, but from engineered economic imprisonment. Society is kept in fragile recovery, never allowed to truly thrive because its surplus is perpetually claimed. This creates the most bitter generational injustice. One generation fights the physical war. They bear the visible scars. They are heroes or victims. But the next generation, their children and grandchildren, are sentenced to pay for it. They inherit a nation that is physically rebuilt but economically shackled. Their dreams are downsized at birth. They are born into indentured servitude to a global financial system. The war killed the parents. The debt enslaves the children. This is not a metaphor. It is a lived experience from the Balkans to the Middle East. The war is a headline. The debt is an heirloom. So we ask the necessary question: if wars truly ended, why do the same companies keep earning for decades? Why do arms manufacturers show steady post-conflict growth? Why do reconstruction funds outperform the market? The answer is clear. Our definition of war is naive. We define it by violent combat and ignore its economic architecture. The battlefield is the opening bid. The real auction is in the conference rooms. This system is not a bug. It is a feature, the logical endpoint of monetized conflict. Peace here is simply a rebranding of the revenue stream from selling bullets to selling blueprints, from tanks to treasury bonds. The players remain. The game just changed its name. Which brings us to the cliffhanger. If this cycle is so predictable, so profitable, what incentive does this network truly have to prevent wars? Or to allow a peace that truly ends, that severs the financial pipelines? If a forever war is a humanitarian disaster, is a forever debt its economically sanctioned successor? We are left with a profound realization. The silence after the guns stop is an illusion. It is filled with the hum of servers processing bond payments, the scratch of pens on long-term contracts, the closing bell of stock exchanges where certain stocks are always a sound investment. This is a call for clarity, to see the world as it is. The first step to changing a system is to understand its true mechanisms to follow the money all the way to the end of the line, which, as we've seen, never really ends. So now, the question is yours. Given this cycle, this permanent transfer of wealth from the broken to the powerful, this multi-generational sentence, should war profits ever be allowed? Is it moral for a corporation's bottom line to be eternally nourished by cyclical destruction? Comment below, yes or not to debate it. And if this truth has connected the dots for you, then you cannot unsee it. Which is why you must see what comes next. We've exposed the profit that outlives the peace. But what if the design is more sinister? What if the financial architecture doesn't just exploit the end of wars, but actively shapes their beginnings? In our next investigation, we go to the source. We trace the memos, the meetings, the economic forecasts that predate the first shot. We expose how banks, funds, and corporations don't just wait for conflict, they help design the board on which it is played. If you're ready to follow the money all the way back, you must watch the next video. The story is just beginning. If this changed the way you see the world, don't let it end here. Stay with this channel, because the next chapter begins where this one ends.